Welcome everybody. Tonight's webinar, Beyond Black Squares. We have from Rowing in Color fame, Denise Aquino and Patricia Destine, and as well as my boss, CEO Susan Smith from US Rowing. So I'm going to introduce you to Susan, and Susan, why don't you take it from here and do some introductions.
Sure. Hello, everybody. I wanted to take a few minutes to kick off tonight's special webinar, Beyond Black Squares, presented by Rowing in Color podcast hosts Denise Aquino and Patricia Destine. Welcome, ladies. This webinar is about giving us steps our organizations need to take in order to change the course of our sport with regard to Black rowers. My name, as Chris said, is Susan Smith, and I'm the interim CEO at US Rowing. I've stepped into this leadership role so US Rowing can take the time to conduct a national search for our next CEO. A very important step for our organization, especially during these times. Now, what we've all experienced in the past few weeks has been heart-wrenching, frustrating, enraging, and very, very sad. And most of us can't begin to imagine that these are emotions that our Black communities experience and endure every single day. We're all here to learn and understand how we can be better, how we can do better. I wanted to mention that our staff and board of directors are all on this webinar. So thank you, Denise and Patricia, for your generosity in helping us begin to understand. And without further ado, let's get started.
Thanks so much, Susan. So as Susan and Chris mentioned, we are the hosts of Rowing in Color, a podcast that is very young. Patricia, when did we have the idea for this?
I would say, I don't know, early, like right around January, maybe a little bit before that.
Yeah, so we're a baby podcast, and we are happy to amplify the voices of color in our sport, and we are happy to do so during this time. And with that context, we do have this presentation called Beyond Black Squares so that we as a rowing community can take steps forward and give each other support and hold each other accountable as well. So, nope. Oh, how do I? There we go. All right, so as we mentioned before, just a quick snippet about us. I'm Philippine American. I have a number of experiences. I started rowing in Binghamton at a club crew team. Learned a lot there, and for anyone who is also in a club crew team, I mean, you also understand that the work doesn't end when you put the boat back on the rack. You know, then you got to fundraise, then you just got to fundraise. But so I learned a lot from there, and I also coached in Anchorage, Alaska, and then I came back to New York, where I'm from, and that's a little bit about me. Patricia?
Yeah, I'm Haitian American. My parents came from Haiti. They had me here. I joined rowing New York in 9th grade, and so I worked there. I rowed there for 4 years, and then I worked there for about 5 years now. So been there for about 7 years total. Yeah.
So, sorry. So combined, we have about 25 years of experience, both as participants in collegiate, youth, high school, club settings, and not only as participants, but also coaches, and a little bit on the admin level as well. So just a little bit about where we're coming from. And if you don't already listen to our podcast, you can find it on Apple, Spotify. If you're on the Q&A, feel free to list anywhere else that we haven't listed here for where else the podcast is available. And feel free to subscribe. All right, moving forward. The goal of this webinar is to move beyond just posting a black square and moving beyond where we are right now, so that way we can take next steps forward. You will leave with actionable steps that you can take to make your boathouse more inclusive. You'll also lead with support and structure to navigate difficult conversations, which we will underlie why this is so important. And then, like we said before, a network of accountability, because no one should be doing this alone. We are not in this by ourselves. We are in this as a community, and we're here to support each other and help move this sport together. Here's your first do now. Join the community at Facebook. We have a few members already, and feel free to check it out, facebook.com/rowingincolor. We have a few members there. And we also have some announcements there just for the group members that we don't publicize to anyone else. So feel free to join it. We don't exclude anybody. Patricia and I are both admins, so we'll make sure to approve everyone who joins. All right, Patricia, you want to take this one?
Nope.
Did she say no?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Well, that doesn't show anything about our relation. Okay. No, it's okay. It's okay. I'll do it. All right. So far in the last week, we have been able to connect other rowers with each other. I can't believe you did that. Connect other rowers with each other, just stemming from our episodes and just folks reaching out, just trying to connect. So for example, you look on the left, Collegiate Rowers of Color. Right now it says 68 members. Last week it started with 15. And that was 68 members was this morning. So it is growing, And to join that group, check out, well, we'll send it to you later, but you can check out our Instagram at any time. If you don't follow already, it is Rowing in Color on our Instagram account. And you can find the link to this group there. Another group growing community is the Trans Rowers Network. After posting our first Pride episode of the month, first of 4 episodes, we had a bunch of folks who identify as transgender reach out, wanting to connect with each other. And so there's a network of trans rowers who are building a community by and for trans rowers. And these aren't just communities just to be communities, by the way. We seek feedback from them. We seek input. We want to make sure that anything that we do with the podcast going forward is informed with the input received from the groups that we want to serve. And so if you don't see your group here yet, and I know that, for example, I know Manny and Saratoga has reached out to me about a mentorship network. I know that Carol from, I don't remember what state, but has reached out to me regarding a network for white coaches who want to be allies. If your group isn't mentioned here, then please connect. The high school group on the right, it only has 7 members, but we know there are a lot more high school rowers of color out there. So let's grow these groups. That way, when recruiters reach out to us and they're asking for rowers of color, we know exactly where to point. If we have folks who are working on a statement to NCAA, we can just ask the Collegiate Rowers of Color to put together a statement, and then we can amplify their voices. We want to make sure that everyone's voices are amplified. We're not here to advocate for anybody. Our mission is to amplify the voices of color in rowing, because your voices should already be enough. Okay, Patricia, you're going to do this one.
I got this. this.
Yeah. Okay.
So, if anyone, okay, so this is a conversation about what we can do to move on in this conversation about race, about diversity in rowing. And so our first step is to listen. If you've heard any of our last recordings or any of the interviews that me and Denise have done in the past, we've mentioned this. So step 1 is to listen. Step 2 is to acknowledge. And step 3 is to course correct. If you're a rower, this is perfect because this connects with you, because we all know how it feels to listen to your coach, and then have your coach listen to you. And you also know how to acknowledge each other and make sure that we both understand that we're on the same page. And then we all know that when we're racing, sometimes we have to leave the game plan a little bit and course correct. There's a boat cutting us off. We have to figure out new tactics to get around that boat and to win in that race. So this conversation we're going to use the analogy of a regatta, a race to get there. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, we're good.
All right. Thanks.
And
then,
so
sorry, I was just going to say the do now on the bottom.
Go.
Okay, now your turn.
Oh, yes. So do now follow at Different Strokes Rowing on Instagram. That's another one of another organization that is doing something similar to get our work, to spread the word of rowing. and diversity in rowing. So definitely take the initiative and follow anything and everyone who is trying to make our sport more diverse.
Yeah, because if we're trying to increase visibility, we first need to see it ourselves. So that way we know what our vision is. We can pick out a point and make our course towards that direction. Thanks, Patricia. All right, so first step, everyone is going to get used to seeing a lot of Black rowers. So our first step is to listen. So using the same exact analogy that Patricia mentioned, the coxswain or the bow person, whoever is steering, you need to listen to what's being said, because someone can see something that you're not seeing, and maybe you're in a spot where it's unsafe, or there's some people in your boat that are unsafe, or you're just not getting the fastest part of the river, or you're about to collide with something. So the first part is to listen. Part of that is because we want to build trust. Before taking any action whatsoever, we need to build trust and repair the relationships with people who not only are in our boathouse, but also the people who might have quit and left our boathouse, because there is feedback there that is so valuable. There's information, there's data there that is so valuable that we need to understand, because that is in our blind spot. And how can we make sure that our boat follows the fastest, the safest course unless we check all our blind spots? And so in this scenario, we need to listen to the folks who are speaking up and gain trust, build trust, have these honest discussions, these tough conversations, because otherwise, then we fall into the trap of unintentional gatekeeping. Patricia, we're going to jump into an example. So we do a little bit of this in the podcast too, for those of you who are not familiar, but Patricia, give me an example of a time when you have spoken up about something race related within the rowing context, and you were listened to, and how did that feel like?
So this is an example that I also used in the recording, if you do hear that one. But one of the examples that is pretty recent this year was, so this year our team got a large amount of Black boys. We recruited from an all boys school, but this school is in the Bronx, if you've ever been there, and they're all Black boys, but they've never been to rowing, they've never got on the water or anything like that. And I'm the only Black coach in my boathouse. I'm the only Black coach in general at my organization. And so when they came to our boathouse, the conversation, it felt as if a lot of people were just looking at me to be that person who was going to deal and kind of bridge the gap between Black kids and the rowing world. And I'm supposed to speak the Black lingo, apparently. And that's not always true, because every Black person has their own life. Everyone team and everyone has spoken, and their culture is different. So when that happened, I made it very clear to my supervisor and the head coach at the boathouse that I'm not going to be that Black person. I'm not going to be that Black coach, because it sets a bad stigma for me as that Black coach, as if I'm supposed to be the angry Black woman to them, because if they're not listening, then I'm supposed to be the one who corrects them, be the one who puts them in their place. So early on, I made that very clear. And in that moment, when I said that, I was expecting some tension, because in the past, when I would say things like that, the conversation was like, okay, it was an okay, but it was like, no, you're going to do this either way. But when I expressed this to my supervisor and the head coach, they were astonished. They were just like, what are you talking about? No, you are definitely not going to be that person. That is not your role here. You are a coach, not the Black coach. And for that moment, I was just like, I was holding in a breath that I didn't realize I was holding, and I let it go. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even realize this was very tense for me to bring this up, because in the past, I was not listened to. So I was like, how am I supposed to get him to see why I don't want to be that bad guy? And it was just, it seems like such a small thing, because
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, you don't want to coach, you don't want to be that coach. But in that moment, I was told so many times in the past that well, you might understand them better. You're a woman. You might understand them better if you're Black. And I was being told by male, and this is the part I think that made me let go of that breath. I was being told by white male coaches that they didn't expect this responsibility from me. And that made me feel so much better because I was like, okay, then we're working as a team and not Patricia's the black coach, she's going to figure it out. So that was my listening moment from a white coach listening to me. And I was like, I can do this. This year will go amazing with these kids.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important. I think you touched on like the homogeneity or the sometimes like putting all Black people in a box and just expecting like all Black people to be the same and all Black people to have the same experiences and like one Black person to speak for all Black people. But you did touch on the fact that when folks listen, then it's a dialogue. And when you have dialogues, then you have conversations that move the sport forward. Then you have conversations that find a solution instead of just sitting on the problem. So ways to listen. I mean, we use a lot of this in the podcast for those who do listen. We use a lot of probing questions like, tell me more, say more. Even though we don't publish the video, we do a lot of, nonverbal, what's it called? Nonverbal language. I'm losing my words right now. Nonverbal language, nonverbal cues, etc. And things not to do, what listening does not look like. Patricia, you look like you have a really good description of what listening does not look like. Do you want to share?
Yeah, I do. I always have. When I like to say this, when we are recording and we talk about this podcast, we're talking about stories, or I'm hearing the stories of other fellow people of color, I get this like bubble in my head where I'm like remembering all like the transgressions against me in that moment. And so when Denise and you were talking about this slide of listening, of not listening, automatically I envisioned the conversation I had with a group of my fellow staff members. And I remember we were doing kind of like a discussion survey, kind of figuring out what it was a round table, it was a rowing round table we were doing, and kind of just discussing different ways, techniques that we could start implicating, are not working, what's working. And I remember doing a survey, and one of the questions or the comment was, how do you deal with athletes who don't want to read enough, or who I can't even remember the right question it was, but I remember the conversation, and one of the white coaches there, she said, well, I don't understand why the kids are not reading enough. And I in that moment I was like, we work with inner city children. Yes, there are libraries in the city, but do you not think of the reasons why a kid might not be reading? And it was just in that moment, all the other coaches were quiet about it, and I was like, I have to say something. And I was like, well, there are several reasons why kids in this neighborhood would not be reading as much as you think a kid from wherever you're from would be reading more. Like, you have kids who can't afford books. Books cost a lot of money. How could it? Like, I was lucky as a Black child, as a Haitian American child, to have a library in my house. Like, early on when my parents bought books for me. But I knew a lot of kids growing up whose parents didn't have a library. And this is a story I was telling her. I was like, I remember having friends who did. They were borrowing books from the school and bringing them back and forth. And I had kids I had friends who didn't know how to read at their age level and were running. And it's simply little things of not being able to afford to buy books. Not having parents who are around to learn to teach them how to read books earlier on in life, and that joy. Like, my parents had me at 4 years old. I was doing it naturally. They read to me. And so you have to remember, I was trying to explain to her that you have to remember that, like, that comes even from home. That's something the teachers can teach you in that short period of time that you're with them during the day. That's something that your parents have to raise you with, that, like, here's some letters, here's some books, here's a picture book, whatever the case is. And it didn't seem to click with her. She was just like, well, they go to school, like, why does the teacher help them? Why does the teacher give them a book? Why does the teacher not loan them books? I'm like, it's not the teacher's not giving to them. By the time you are of age and in school, it is facing that joy sometimes, because it's not something you were given at home. And when you go home, no one's enforcing it all the time. Like, everyone remembers getting that reading log and just taking those, like, I read 3 chapters that night, and we magically didn't go home and read 3 chapters unless we were told to. And it still was a tug of war with her. She didn't want to understand that part. And I was like, you don't understand. You are working in this location with these kids, and you're blind to their struggles. And I remember, like, her saying, like, well, what can, like, maybe we should just buy books for them then. And I'm just like, you're never gonna get it, because you're so to be a solution based person. Like, I got a cut, let's put a Band-Aid on it. Don't worry about how I got cut or what we need to fix next time, how the nail got into the injury or whatever. You're just like, okay, they can't read, here's a book. But you're not thinking about how to help them implicate that at home. Because if my mom and dad didn't come here 20 years before I was born, I would not be a reader like English wouldn't be my strong. Like I would learn English in school, not at home. I don't speak English at home. I speak Haitian Creole at home. And so you have to remember, like when these kids go home, you give them English books. Mom and dad can't read English. Who's reading that book to them? Who's going to help them read this book and understand this hard word, except the teacher who has 30 kids more over? And it was just a fight. And I remember just watching this in the room with all the other staff members, and they're kind of like, we don't want to talk about this. I'm like, but you guys have to talk about this because this is the kids you serve. How could you not want to talk about something that's affecting your children? So that was a non-listening moment. And we don't do that. I remember her looking at me and going, you don't need to get mad. And I was like, I need to walk out of that room. I literally said, tell me how to feel now, because I'm not supposed to be angry that you are being blind to the situation of our children, because at the end of the day, they're with us 4 hours, 5 hours out of the week. You know, like, how could you be so blinded to it? And it was one of the ones like, you didn't listen to me. Now you're questioning my feelings and telling me how to feel. This is just like a very aggressive conversation. I had to walk out because it was like, you're my boss and here I am. I can't do this. So it was very tense. And that's a non-listening moment.
That is a non-listening moment. And
that was a lot.
No, it's perfect. And for folks who didn't catch all of that, we do have a few surprises for you guys. One of them is a surprise, one of a few surprise episodes for tomorrow, including part of this conversation. So with that in mind, I mean, listening does not look like defensiveness. It does not look like telling someone how to feel. And listen, make it a two-way conversation. Next, acknowledge. And you mean if a coxswain is, I mean, how frustrating is it for a coach whenever you say something and the coxswain, doesn't respond, doesn't move, and you're like, did they hear me? I don't know if they heard me. I think in this situation, in what's happening in our country, I think the equivalent of raising one's hand as a coxswain, I think is putting a black square. And it's funny because I forgot who I was talking to. Maybe the person can say in the Q&A who it was, but I was talking to someone saying, wow, it's really interesting. I see so many people, so many places putting up black squares, and there were places and people that called me the N-word and this and that. And so I think that, I mean, I wish I had the recording so that way I wouldn't have to speak for that person, and that way that person can say this themselves, because again, their voice should be enough. But the black square is the equivalent of raising one's hand. And therefore, this photo here is the equivalent of what we should be doing next. Being really, really, really proactive, because, I mean, it's past the point now. It's past the point. All the other sports, not that we have to compare ourselves to all the other sports, but all the other sports are diversifying, and we need to move in that direction as well. Football was a white sport, basketball was a white sport, tennis was a white sport. And look at how great they've gotten after they've integrated. So let's move in that direction. There's your do now. I don't have to read it for you. Some of you already know. The link is in our link tree in our Instagram. So acknowledge. Let's do more than put that hand up. I don't know how that coxswain keeps balance in there. I don't know. Anyway. It's really active. So that's the type of movement that we need. And an example, so for example, someone says something, and Patricia, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but after speaking up, especially if it's something that I didn't want to have to say something about, I didn't want to have to point out something to someone, I didn't want to make someone feel uncomfortable. I think what's harder about speaking up is the heavy silence that follows, that stare, that silence. And therefore, for someone who is receiving someone's vulnerability, for someone who is listening, the next step that you need to do when someone is sharing all of this knowledge, all of their experiences, all their story, is to validate it. You can say, I hear you. You can give them a nonverbal cue. You can nod. You can also summarize. You can say, so what I hear you saying is this. Like, please clarify. I want to understand. You can also say, so when I did blank, you felt blank. And just saying how, like, Patricia, you felt angry, you felt frustrated. Saying that to someone, and I mean, I don't know, from my experience, it validates so much that I'm not crazy for seeing this or thinking this. And so acknowledge, raise your hand, stand up in the boat, all that stuff. This is the type of work we need to do now. And what it doesn't look like, what acknowledging doesn't look like, is saying, all right, I got this, I'll fix this. Let me get back to you. Because we don't want to fall into the trap of being the one who takes it all on. You know, white guilt can happen, and as a result, maybe white saviorism can happen too as well. You don't want to be the one that has to take on all this and then make it just like that one person's responsibility. It's not just one person's responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility. And so let's just keep it a two-way street, listen and acknowledge. And then the meat of what we want to talk about today is course correcting. So here we have 5 singles, I can't count. But this is from the Bahamas Rowing Instagram account. If you want to, again, see more Black people rowing, how can we increase the visibility in our sport if we can't even increase the visibility within our own personal world, within what we see on social media? So, I mean, basic course corrections. I don't know. Patricia, correct me if I'm wrong. You're also a coxswain. So, you mean, you got to pick your point. You got to know where you're going. You know, is it that mountain, or is it that tree, the one with the eagle's nest, or the one with like the red leaves? Like, let me know. You got to pick your point. Where are you going? And we'll elaborate what that means. But you got to define, like, what does it look like for your boathouse to be diverse or inclusive? Because what it looks like in New York is not the same as what it looks like in South Dakota, not the same as what it looks like in Oklahoma. Diversity is defined differently everywhere. We'll go into that later. Then you got to adjust. I was also taught as a coxswain to never, bring it to one side or the other. It's small changes. And I don't know. I don't know, Patricia, is it just small changes, right? Maybe.
I think it's always small changes. I don't think it's ever going to be this like wake up and bam, we're diverse. It's going to be tiny, small things.
Yeah, otherwise that boat is going to be like writing your name in the water or something. So it's got to be small changes that make the big impact later on, small adjustments. And we got to be patient with that. We just got to be patient. But, if there's a buoy coming and it was only 50 feet away, call for pressure when necessary. And we'll elaborate exactly what that means. All right, so we are going to refer to a lot of, again, like our mission is to amplify, so why wouldn't we be doing that here? So if you have your phone out, we will be following along on some of the things that our folks have mentioned. So we're just proud of our community, so we just want to feature it. So that's Rowing in Color. If you go to instagram.com/rowing in color, you could click next steps. All right, so you got to pick your point, be specific, define what success looks like. I'm not going to read through all the examples. I mean, there's so many examples here. But if you're not specific, if you don't say like, Patricia, I really think that our club needs to be diverse. And you'll be like, okay, what does that look like? Like what needs to be diverse about it? Like, Patricia, there's like no Asians here. There's no queer people here. I don't know. So define.
You definitely have to have a.
Yeah, and point it out. Point out who's missing. I mean, we'll talk about this later, but like within a 1 to 2 mile radius of your boathouse, you walk by, drive by, take the bus by neighborhoods that maybe there are people in those neighborhoods that you don't see inside your boathouse. So how can we get those folks inside our boathouse and not just, those far away neighbors that we don't really talk to? So define what success looks like to you, and it will look very different for different people. But one place to start is starting up top, because it has to start with leadership. We can do our book clubs, we can have our tough conversations on the ground, but if it doesn't happen up top, then it's not going to happen at all. We need to pick our point, and it needs to be that faraway mountain. It can't be that geese over there or that buoy over here. It's got to be just like coxswain. You got to pick your point and that vision. Set a time frame. Patricia, you want to talk about this? No.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So you definitely have to set a time frame. And a realistic one, not one like, okay, well, in 2021, we're all going to be diverse. That is not realistic. We need to set small time frames within your organization. Let's say we're in June. Let's say, okay, by August, we want to have a virtual event. Let's say, because right now everything's virtual. Let's say we want to have a virtual event where we invite, I know, people in your community to just get to do a virtual tour of your site, of your bull house. So that right there is inviting people from that area, that 1 to 2 mile radius, to come and get to see it. Yes, they can't physically be there, but they can see what rowing looks like. Because most times, people in your community don't know what rowing is or how your site looks or setup is. Yeah, they walk by it. Yes, they drive by it, but they're not really sure what's like amazing treasure is inside of it.
Yeah.
You know, and then from there you keep building. Okay, let's say you guys have talked about what your goal is in the end, and then it's every 3 months. So every 3 months you should have an event or some type of structure set up where it's like we're having a conversation with the community within the bull house, and we're having a conversation with the community outside the bull house, where it's like, okay, what are we doing? What's the next step? Okay, yes, we've recruited 3 kids of color or 3 participants of color, whichever race that may be. Okay, but how do we go about it? Okay, look, what are other things that we need to do? Who's still missing, and what's the next conversation step to this? And that could be something simpler as, well, should we start doing more book clubs now? So should we introduce a book club now into our site? We've done the virtual tour, and let's do a book club where it's like, okay, we'll read books of color, books about race, books about how to diversify rowing. Let's do a listening of a podcast. It doesn't have to be Rowing Color, but Rowing Color is always great. But it could be anything. There's so many out there that are not surrounded by rowing, but just about diversity. It could just be understanding that the background, the history of white and black racism, or why we are so why there's this tug of war. There is so much history behind it, and a lot of times we like to live in the current future. Like, we like to go, well, we don't remember what happened in the past, but that is something that we as a site, and we as a organization, and as a world, as humanity, have to acknowledge, and we have to get keyword acknowledge, and then we have to move on with and understand why we are who we are now. You have to understand why a black person is afraid to go certain places, or why white people are afraid to go certain places. And that's the conversation you can then have in your time frame of, okay, this is something we need as a group, as a bull house, to look into. So that is definitely something, that's how you can kind of like set up your time frame. There's so many ways that you as a site and organization you can do it, but making them not long-term ones, or making them there's a long-term goal, but you need smaller short-term goals where it's like 3 months or every 6 months, or I think, at least for us, I think what I've noticed that works best is shorter time frames. 3 months, let's check in, let's talk, let's do something. Every 3 months works better than every 6 months. There's in 6 months something can happen. In 3 months a lot can happen, but there's a lot that we can still course correct. Another key word of the day. Course correct.
Yes, exactly. And so we got some dates here. I mean, Juneteenth, which is June 19th. Juneteenth is coming up. That'll be a major deadline for a few things that we have. We have some action items for you later. We want to make sure that we're keeping ourselves accountable. For the next month, we actually have a few key dates and deadlines. So that way, again, like, even though we have this huge vision, we have to take strokes to get there, right? And the boat still has to be balanced to get there. So let's take it one step at a time. And I think 3 months, boards generally meet every 3 months anyway. So we already have some structure there already. All right, so you've picked your point. Now you got to adjust that steering. I'll give you a second to digest this. There's a lot of text here. So there are a lot of great, there's a lot of great variations of rowers for BLM right now. There's rowers.for.blm and rowers FOR BLM. But I mean, the fact that there are so many iterations is a really great thing, because while current events should not have had to happen in order for us to come up with all of these opportunities and come up so united as a sport to try to push it in a different direction, although those current events, I wish for any other reason other than for those to be the reason for us to be moving forward, those still are great resources. And it's just so inspiring to see that there are multiple folks out there, and we're happy to just promote each other out. You know, there are multiple folks out there creating events like the one this Saturday, June 13. There's so many other fundraisers made by other folks that, you know, maybe we haven't heard of or maybe we haven't seen yet. And so small events here and there. Here's your first one, June 13th. If you haven't already, check them out at Rowers for BLM. I mean, check them out. They and their other 2 iteration of Instagrams have got a lot of things going on. And we want to make this not just a June 2020 thing. This is a, you know, if we're gonna do this, you don't just get in a boat and say, yeah, I'll row like 2 hard strokes today. No, like you're in it. You're in it. So you got to adjust that steering, but you also got to take those small steps, you know, small steps here. All right. And when necessary, call for pressure. A lot of folks did write to their respective organizations. Folks wrote to US Rowing. A lot of folks had a lot to say about a lot of things. And I am so happy to say that so many members of our community did take action steps. I'm shouting out to Trinity Billingsley. She and a few of her alumni reached out to her school and wrote a letter. We shout out her Instagram later on. Columbia Lightweight Rowing, those guys wrote a letter to the government officials for their area in Washington Heights. And so folks, and it's not just limited to these 2 Instagram handles or these 2 folks, there are multiple places doing this, calling for pressure, because the change has to start from the top. We need that vision, because otherwise everything that we do, it's not going to mean a lot over the long run. It might be that Band-Aid just temporarily, but we need more than a Band-Aid right now. We need a little bit more pressure. So like we said, it starts from the top, and normalize checking your blind spots. Patricia, tell us what checking our blind spots means.
Checking our blind spots. So a lot of times, you know, when we're just going down the race course, we don't notice that boat that's like inching up right next to us. We don't. Sometimes it's by the time the coxswain is screeching and you see bow, like you're like, oh, I should have made a move. And now you're trying to get that boat to just like hop over there. You're calling those weird power tens, and the team is like, I don't know what's happening.
That's
so
really
that
detailed
is
memory.
blind spot and wrong. But our blind spot, we don't talk about these things.
Sorry, go on. I'm so sorry.
But but when it comes to rowing and diversity, our blind spot a lot of times is we assume we have done it right. We're just like, yep, I'm that white person. I've done it. I've done everything in my possible, in my box to do it. But then you put that like, okay, well, I put a Spanish language, pamphlet out there, and it's like, okay, great. So my Spanish speakers are okay, but will that piece of paper for the Spanish speakers work for your English Black rowers or your English speaking Asian rowers? It won't, because that does nothing for them. Yes, that has closed your gap in one place, but then now you've left space in other locations in your organization. And so your blind spot is to then deal with, okay, well, am I doing my part to hire coaches of color? Did you check that? Did you check that there are coaches of color in your area who are looking for rowing positions, or did they even know you existed? So they to try to get hired there or to volunteer there. Did you check to see if if you work with youth, did you check that there are youth in your community that might want to row? And you've done everything in your possibility to look into all the public schools, and you've tried all the new technical ways of like recruiting, or fun ways to recruit? Or did you hit up your colleges in the area? Did I go to that college and go, okay, well, yeah, we're a club, so you might have to pay for it. We might have to figure out a discount to get coaches, to get rowers of color to join you. There are people who don't know how to row. Yes, they are adults, but there's plenty of ways to incorporate learn to row into your program. So checking your blind spot is finding different ways, looking at your checklist and be like, did I do this? Did I do this? Did I do this? And after you're done checking that list down, if you're missing spots, then you obviously you need to go back and reevaluate that. But if you don't check that, if you're not checking those boxes and you just look at your boathouse and go, well, I assume that I did my best, then did you really check your blind spot? If you look at your boathouse and you can't see a rainbow of people, then you didn't check your blind spot.
A rainbow of people.
Happy Pride Month.
Thank you. Yes. Thanks so much for that. I feel like I'm turning red. Yes, there are, and one of our call to action items is to literally on Google Maps type in your boathouse address and look, zoom out 1 mile, 2 mile. Who are we not connecting with? Who didn't we put a flyer in their coffee shop or their community board? Or like everyone has a community board. Every small business, any place that is a community has a community board. And that's where your flyer should be. It should not be inside your boathouse. That's like putting a label inside a bottle and being like, oh yeah, I know exactly what this is. And like that, no, it doesn't make any sense. You got to put these out in the community in places that you might not be used to going. Maybe you go to Starbucks, but maybe you should go to the bodega instead. So you got to check your blind spots. You got to go where your community is going, where the people, and look around in your boathouse, who is missing. Look at the rainbow, who's missing here, and make sure that you're able to check those blind spots, make sure that we're getting the full scope of our community, because how can we ever make our sport look like our country if we can't even make it look like our own communities? I'll leave it at that. All right. So in summary, I'm just going to go back for just a second. Oh, that was a lot of back. So you got to pick your point. When it comes to course correcting, you got to pick your point, know where you're going, define it, set timelines. Adjust your steering, small adjustments. Book clubs are great. There's nothing wrong with book clubs. Listening to our podcast and discussing things is great too, although that discussion guide is kind of heavy, so maybe that's not a small step. But there are small things that you can do over time. And then in cases of emergency, which this, like I said, like we're not just waving our hand, we're standing in the boat. In cases of emergency, we got to call forward pressure when needed. So we do link that discussion guide. It is hard. It is very tough. If you are not used to having these sort of conversations, it is very tough. And a lot of these questions do force you to look into that blind spot. And I mean, Patricia, I know you said just white folks, but I think it also applies to non-Black people of color too. And yeah. And I think if, for example, if you were creating a regatta trip for a bunch of Filipinos like me, and you didn't know, for example, that, you know, like we really love our rice, or I don't know, like we really, actually we don't, we eat everything. We're just happy to be there. So I don't know, you got to check your blind spots because you don't reflect the community that you're in front of. The point I'm trying to prove is that diversity is not just a code word for Black and brown. And diversity is just a different amalgamation, you know, different representation. It's not a code word for Black and brown. That's not what diversity is. Diversity means you just got to have different populations in the same place. It's got to be a different representation, not a code word for Black and brown. Can't emphasize that enough. Yeah?
I agree. To add on, because that rice comment did remind me of something. You have to remember the way you're going about checking your blind spots. You have to then look at also the way you have gone about doing everything you're doing to diversify your team, because it might just be the way you're going about it might be very how do I explain? You've just been pointing it. It's like if I've had me that their way of recruiting Black people into rap music. Okay, I'm Black. I'm Haitian American. I don't really like rap music all the time. I listen to country music. Okay, you know, like I ask Denise, she's driven in the car with me.
You're not
I
allowed
do
to
listen
pick
to
music.
like country music, and so so if you are someone who assumes that by you putting a certain type of music on is going to recruit, or you're going to get this group of people to come because you're driving by with a sign that says your boathouse and you're playing rap music, that is not the way to go. I've recruited people just by simply explaining the sport. I didn't say where we were located. I said where we were located. I just was me, and I was a coach. I was Coach Patricia. I wasn't the Black Coach Patricia. I wasn't the Haitian American Coach Patricia. I was just Patricia. And I just stated that this is a site, this is a sport that you're not going to be able to play everywhere else. You're not going to be able to participate everywhere else. You just need to be there. And so you need to check, one of the checks on your blind spot should be how you are going about it. Did I do anything that might offend, but I assume that I'm doing the right thing. It's a big mark I think people should look into when you're checking blind spots. Yes, I went out there and I tried to look for them, but how did I go about it? Your small bullet points under there should be, how did I go about it? Then you start checking those boxes as well off.
And Patricia, I'm gonna go even more further with that, because let's say I'm someone who's thinking, but let's say like I'm so afraid of offending, I don't want to say anything. I just don't want to say anything. What would you say to that?
I'm sorry, repeat the last part.
I guess, like, what if someone hearing what you just said says, well, I don't want to say anything because I'm too afraid of offending somebody, so I'm just going to stay quiet. What is your response to them?
So my response is, silence is helping the oppressor. I know that sounds really like, oh my God. But by you being silent in that moment, you are allowing us continue down the path that we are going, of not being a diverse sport. So in that moment, yes, it's like the most terrible thing. Because for me, if you guys remember the story I was telling earlier, me telling this white coach, this female white coach, who is technically my boss, I didn't agree with her, could have gone very, very different. I could have, I could have had more tension with her because of that. But in that moment, I had to stand up for the bigger cause, and that bigger cause was my students of color. So by you not saying anything, you are allowing the negative behavior. You're allowing the growth process to kind of get done there. So you need to say something. You need to say it, even if it's not. You don't need to say it in an aggressive way. You don't need to say it in the I need to get a group of people there to say it. You just need to say it in general, because at the end of the day, if you're saying it and they choose not to listen to it, then that is on them. You've done your part to vocalize, and you've done that extra step. And so it's all about speaking out. Anything that we're seeing in the news, we're seeing out here, it's all because someone is speaking out. Social media, the black squares, the idea of black squares, someone got on social media and was like, guys, let's do this, because this is very important to our race, to our race as humans, not just race in black, white, and green, with whatever color, but as a humans, we need to have some basic humanity, and this is not okay. So we need to say something. And so it could seem very tense in that moment, but you need to vocalize. I'm also a very blunt person. If anyone has heard the podcast, I say and do as I please in this world, and I think everyone should, because that was what makes us free people.
Yes, and we do have freedom of speech in this country. And I guess I'm thinking of the folks who are thinking, well then how do I say something, and how do I move on from it? I mean, as someone who has, we've known each other for what, 10 years? I don't know. It's been so long. Oh, that's embarrassing. I wish I didn't say that. Anyway.
So old.
Oh, I wish I didn't say that. Okay, anyway. You've seen how much I've grown. I mean, I haven't been, and I'm still not someone who's like completely racially fluent, so to speak, I guess, to use that terminology. But like, for someone, like, people will make mistakes, and you have to be okay with making mistakes, because that's part of being uncomfortable. Part of that, though, is you need to own up that you said something wrong, and then apologize and move on, because it's not your job to jump in and fix anything. It's not your job to jump in and fix. If you said something I'm trying to think of an example, with the intention of learning more, and then accidentally offend and apologize, that's fine. Just own it and then move on. I mean, Patricia, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I agree. I think when people say something, because a lot of times there's that microaggression under it, and that's what's the problem. It's the microaggression. It's not the fact that you're asking the information. It's that offense that you are saying it in this undertone of, well, can you explain it to me? Because obviously, I don't understand. Or you're like, it's like if I'm like, hey Denise, can you explain to me, I don't know, why we're having this conversation? Like I'm not quite sure. But it's like you kind of have an idea why I might be saying something because I'm obviously upset, but you're not acknowledging that I'm upset. You're acknowledging that like this is an irritation to you for having this conversation. And I think that's that underlying conversation that when people ask questions, a lot of times when people who are not white who are not of color ask questions, kind of like this undertone of, yeah, I'm ignorant, quotation marks, of this information because no one's ever told me this. But I need you as a person of color complaining to tell me so I can then attack every point that you're making. And I think that's what one causes the conversation to kind of stop where it's at, because I'm not going to continue conversing with someone if they're going to, I sense the attack that's about to happen. Like I'm going to be on guard, ready to go and ready to attack back. You know, like we are humans. Survival mode is something that is ingrained in us. If I feel like I'm being attacked, I'm going to be ready. And a conversation, it's not a conversation anymore when you're just like, you explain to me why you're feeling this way.
No,
you know,
no
and there's
education.
it's that tone of why are you feeling this way? It's like no. I don't need to tell you why I feel this way. You just need to accept that I feel this way, and then ask how we can go about the next step to make sure I don't ever feel this way when we have this conversation, or to make sure maybe I'm in the wrong in that moment because you said something, I took it the wrong way. We need to have a conversation about how we've gotten to this point. You don't need to ask why I feel this way because as if my feelings are not real. Like I've just, you know, like they're fairy dust. They're not.
Validate. And I want to clarify, when I said move on, I mean like work towards making sure it doesn't happen again. But thank you for that. Just looking at time. So resources, we are providing a lot of resources. I mean, I guess resources, but we have a lot of folks of color. We interviewed a lot of folks of color so far, but the episodes that we published so far are all Black rowers. And that's really exciting. But we do have a lot of interviews with people of color. We just think that like we originally started to publish in Black History Month, and a lot of folks have said, you know, now's not the time for so-and-so's story. Like now's not the time for my story. It's time to amplify Black voices, Black stories, because again, like Black voices, Black stories should be enough. Resources, we do have a checklist for change, including next steps for what to do going forward. The discussion guide, some folks might have already accessed it already. It is on our Instagram's link tree, and we'll reference that again later. And then this book, So You Want to Talk About Race, it's just, you know, another resource for you to check out. We do have a lot of quotes from episodes on our Instagram. We have a lot of quotes in the podcast. You can listen through each episode. So check that out. And in terms of like updates moving forward, we do have new episodes, plural, tomorrow. We will give out a link / email to access your checklist for change. And these are concrete steps you can take. Some of them have hard deadlines. Like I said, June 19th. There are some hard deadlines for you, but for the next month, you've got a whole list of stuff there. I mean, let me go back. You see that checklist for change on the left? That is dense. That is not just, I don't know. It's a lot of text there. And then follow us on Instagram at Rowing in Color. We will have a website coming up soon. I don't know when soon is, but soon. But in the meantime, follow us at Rowing in Color on Instagram. And that's all from us. Thank you so much, everyone. In terms of Q&A, Patricia, I can't see the Q&A, and Chris, maybe you can help me with that.
Would you like me to
Yeah, sure.
to throw some at you, see what's going, you know, what people are writing in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Henley Love has a question. Do you think big rowing events such as the Head of the Charles, the HR, or the Henley Royal Regatta have a responsibility in making rowing more diverse?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Sorry if I spoke too soon. Yes, absolutely. I mean,
I jumped right with you, so you're good.
I mean, the last time I went to the Charles, I couldn't even buy anything. And I'm not like, I'd say like I'm like middle class, like maybe upper middle class, and I couldn't even buy anything. I mean, how can you expect people to go to the biggest regatta in just ever? How can you expect people to go to the biggest regatta? It doesn't have like fences. You don't pay admission or anything. There's no limit to where you can view on the race course. And then if you want to buy a jacket from, I can't even, I don't want to throw any brands under the bus, but I can't even afford like this brand, that brand, this like, and then to not be able to enjoy in the same way that others. I mean, rowing's already the 1%. I feel that some places like Head of the Charles, I mean, I do respect Head of the Charles and just how many events are. It's such a great an event. However, it kind of caters to the not even 1%, but the 0.05% or 0.5%, and therefore, yeah, there's absolutely more that needs to be done there. I mean, when was the last time you had an all black boat go down the race course, or even a half black boat go down the race course? 1990 something.
I was muted, so sorry. So Henley Love, I believe, is from England, and so the other part of the question is the Henley Royal Regatta. Are there other ideas that you have for ways that these regattas are more than racing, right? They become like like they're much larger than just the racing. Do you have ideas of things that could lend itself that they could do to bring more diversity, to bring more exposure? You've got all these people there. Well, like, what kinds of things can these big regattas do? Any thoughts off the top of your head?
Well, as someone who's never been to Henley,
Yeah,
I mean, what kind of like what are the barriers of access to even be a part of that? I mean, I've been I mean, yeah, I mean, I mean, how publicized and how accessible is it for rowing organizations or clubs to be a part of it? And I mean, not even I didn't even know about rowing blazers until after I did the whole rowing career, like I know that there are these parts that are such staples to the rowing culture, and it's so disappointing that there is a lot of people who aren't able to take advantage of that because the access isn't there. I mean, it's growing for sure, but there's so many beautiful parts of the rowing world. I mean, Patricia, do you have a blazer? I don't have a blazer. Do you?
So I'm like one of the worst rowers in this industry. I don't buy rowing gear like that because I think rowing, like you said earlier, it's so expensive. I remember going to regattas and being like, that's nice, but like besides wearing it at the boathouse and at a regatta, where am I going to wear this again? So they're super expensive. But to add on to kind of what you were saying to me, there's not much access to it for people, especially for teams that are not as privileged in wealth and donations and like boathouse and equipment. Like how it's so hard to get to the trials. It's so hard to get good equipment to the trials, and then you have to figure out who you can borrow from. And if you're not that elite program, it's hard. And I would say that one way to start it off is to start inviting more programs. Find a different way. Like I know it's by ticket. Find a different way to invite programs of color there, and not in a pity way of like, okay, well, you're black, your team has like 10 black kids on there or 10 Asian kids on there, so we're gonna invite you guys to the trials. Find ways that clubs kind of like PCR and Row New York and those programs are going to be able to end up at a regatta like that. Clubs that are in Chicago are going to end up in a regatta like that, because there are clubs in Chicago there's a lot of black kids and they're very diverse already. Try to get them up there. Try to figure out what it is traveling with, because I might be able to get a bid there, but then I can't athletes who can't afford to buy a plane ticket, can't buy that. Like figure out what's the next step. That outside of like, okay, you've got a bid on this, let's figure out what we can do with travel wise. What is there a foundation that the trials or the organization of the organizers of the trials have set up to get teams that can't afford to travel or can't afford hotel stay to get there? Let's say, okay, you guys have 50% and we'll give you 50%. What are we doing as a rowing community to get teams like that there? I think that's the first step. Besides like even getting on the water, how do we travel there? if I can't travel there, even if I have a bid to go there, I'm not going. My team is not going. I'm finding the smallest boat, and if that's 2 kids of color in there, then that's the team that's going.
Tara has a great idea. Tara Morgan has a great idea. She said, at these big regattas, why not more community building and coach development events? Like, I think that's a really good idea as well. Like, while we have all these people here, right?
Yeah, might as well.
Like, let's bring them all together and start, building some community and building coaching development.
Yeah.
Great idea, Tara. Agnes says, make Black rowers feel safe at events. Athletes experience racism at regattas, so there should be zero tolerance policy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's crazy because I feel like that's a no-brainer, and the fact that somebody has to write that and say that, like, that to me is crazy. Yeah, of course, Agnes, you're absolutely 100% right. I'm trying to read all these. So if so, people, when you're putting it in chat and Q&A and going back and forth to each one of them, it is a little bit remove limited access areas, and so that's a thought. If you guys want to jump in on any of that, provide merchant space to Black-owned businesses is another thought.
Yes.
What else here? Let's get some of these. I love that everybody's like flooding all these ideas. It should show us that there's plenty of good ideas out there, right? We're just not acting on them. That seems like the major, like, there are plenty of people, good people with plenty of good ideas. We just don't act on them. So
I think also part of that, though, is, access to the people who can help make things happen, which is why we try to create this community. Because even though I can tell Patricia the best ideas in the world or the worst ideas in the world, what power can we to do anything, other than like putting a mic and then hooking it up to like Spotify or whatever? What power do we have to do that other than social pressure, which is really powerful? But still, it's still a who game. But Chris, to your point, I think we do need to act on it together as a community. And I'm so glad that US Rowing is hosting this webinar, because there are a lot of ideas. And again, we're amplifying, we're not advocating. We're amplifying the voices, because the voices and the ideas and the stories are there. And we're so happy that US Rowing is allowing us to use this platform to share share the voices of our community with US Rowing and all the other leaders in our country for as far as rowing is concerned. So I think that yes, these are such possibilities, such low to medium hanging fruit. We can absolutely make it happen, and I think you're right.
Well, don't let us off that easy, Denise. Yeah, we're amplifying, but we can do more, right? We can all do more.
Yeah.
So don't let us off too easy here. Possibly including regatta shirts and race sign up. Yeah, another thing that strikes me is that the people who can do more, literally, there are a lot of people that generate ideas, right? But the people who can do more have to prioritize these opportunities higher up on the list than just saying, well, we can't do that this year, when you actually could. You just weren't willing to separate out something that wasn't, that was a priority for you, So many questions here. So you mind if I keep rocking some questions for you here?
Sure.
Let's see here. Is BLJ Community Rowing a sponsor? I don't know if that means a sponsor of you guys.
Of us? No one sponsors. Sponsor. No, she's not a sponsor of us. She's just just one of the very few Black-owned, operated, run rowing organizations. So we just want to make sure that her platform is seen and just amplifying.
Penelope writes, would you please post the FB Insta contacts for other US Rowing America Rows programs? So, Penelope, let me get in touch with the US Rowing person in charge of that and see if we can get that out to everybody. So I think that would be something we can do. That would seem to be pretty easy to do. From an assistant coach, if we have tried to encourage change in our clubs without much success, is there a next step on that route? Or is it more effective to leave that club and try to find one that is committed to doing the work to restructure with equity in mind?
So as an assistant, who I feel like I've made impact in my club, I don't think I think it depends on your site, of your program, how you're, who's in charge. If they are obviously, if your head of coach is obviously very defiant on like not changing, maybe it's time to either going to your anyone who's above that person, if you can, have a sit down with them and be like, these are the issues I'm seeing. These are the issues I think we need to fix. This is how I've attempted to fix them, and here are some more ideas. If at that point, if they're just like, nah, that's not for us, maybe I would look into something that fits more of your what you're fighting for, what you're pushing for. But I think every person in that site can create change. It could be you. It could be you getting along and talking more with your coworkers, and figuring out how you guys can go about it. You personally alone, I think Denise said it earlier, will not be able to just create change by yourself. You can't wake up and go, well, I think this needs to happen, and you're going to do it alone. It has to be a team effort, and it has to be you trying everything in your power, going from the top to the bottom of your organization, and figuring out how to go about it. Sometimes you have to step out of your assistant level, and go, I need to talk to the highest person in that. If it means talking to a board member, then board members have a lot of power. We forget this sometimes because we don't see them when you're working. But board members have a lot of power. They have a lot of pull. If you as a staff member go to a board member and you're like, look, I've done this, this, and this, and nothing is changing, then that is the impact that you have now left in that board member to bring into a board member meeting and to cause change. If that doesn't change on your level, then maybe that's a place not for you. But you've now left an impact for the future to now figure out how to change. That's something that's going to be reported and be told about. And so that you might not see change in your time frame right now, and you might leave and go to another program, but there will be change. Yeah. Denise, did you have anything you want to add on to that?
Ah, that's it. You did it.
Okay.
Well, there's more, so we got plenty here.
Sure.
Is there a way to develop a rowing culture, a new team at a Title I high school? Is there a way to develop a rowing culture?
I think so. I mean, so I guess just giving a little bit about my experience. So I've had experience working with a lot of public schools to just get indoor rowing inside. I oversaw a program that outreached almost 5,000 students from public schools. Shout out to Lizzie Simons for helping with that and spearheading that. But given that, yes, there's a way to make rowing culture. And I think it starts a lot with relationship building. I mean, I don't remember how many schools that we went to, but the schools that we were able to establish the strongest relationships were able to have, those bulletin boards where they post like the students like test grades or the art that they did. They had like the sport that we're doing this week is rowing. I mean, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of schools in this country that do not ever even talk about like, let's post rowing up there, other than unless you're, private school or whatnot. But I can't think of that many public schools that feature rowing on a bulletin board. I know there's one school in Washington Heights. They have a whole, like, here are the photos of our rowers from all of these years. And when you have rowing visible where your students are, where your youth is for 7 or 8 hours a day, then what do you think they're going to look forward to when they leave? So I think, if I remember the question correctly, is there a way? Yeah, you got to build that relationship with the PE teacher, the athletic director, the principal. I mean, I've gone to even just like walking in and just waiting until the principal had like 5 minutes to talk and just get my pitch down and ready and just go, and is there a way? Yeah, build those relationships, come in with a clear idea of what rowing will look like, help get like videos or photos of what rowing does look like so that way they can post it. And once you have the teacher and the school on your side, it'll be so much easier.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. Also, you have to remember that a lot of the Title I schools, they want something else, because those gym classes are very boring for those kids. And a lot of times they're just throwing basketballs to them or hula hoops, whatever, like free play equipment that they can. and they would love to have something structured, something consistent. So if you are able to get connected, like Denise is saying, like we've done in the past with a school like that, then 100% the PA, the PE teacher, the principal, whoever you're in contact with, will do everything in their power to get you in the school, to get those kids showing up to that session. They want it, they need it, they love it.
There's so many.
I'm noticing, I just saw something. They're about patrons.
Yep.
There's a conversation. Yeah, they're asking about patrons. Denise, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Patrons or Patreon?
Patreon.
Oh.
Patreon.
What Grace was saying is, I want to ask how can we support your work, is what Grace is asking, I believe.
Thanks, Grace.
So what do you all think?
Yeah, I'm getting red. So we did set up a Patreon. Originally, Patricia and I were thinking, we're going to do this work, and we want to make sure that, we have this vision that hopefully one day we'll be able to raise all this money from our listeners to go to scholarships that go to kids who, need it, so that way they don't quit the sport. And that way it helps them, get whatever they need, so that way they can go to that rowing camp or get this thing or anything that'll help them take them where they want to be in the sport. And so that was our original idea. But if this is the Grace that I think it is, Grace was very helpful in convincing me and me and Patricia to set up a Patreon. It's patreon.com/rowingincolor. So it's completely optional. I mean, we do this out of love. We do this because we want to. We do this because we want to. I guess the fact that we laughed when you said sponsors before, I guess just goes to show how we're happy to do the work, but I mean, eventually, girls gotta eat. So we'll happily accept anything. We'll happily accept anything you want to send our way. But for now, Patreon, patreon.com/rowingincolor. Next question.
Do you think it's effective to start diversifying by recruiting multi-sport athletes, especially for scholastic teams?
Yeah. I've had kids who were basketball players, who were soccer players. I've had ice hockey, and they jumped into rowing, and they loved it, and it was easy. It was not easier for them, but because they already had this the structure, they're used to the structure of being an athlete. They're used to the hard work. They're used to being asked to push themselves in a direction that they sometimes don't know what the end goal will look like, but they're used to that everyday push, that everyday drive. So when you take them from one sport, you teach them how to row, they might be your stroke seat. They might be your top coxswain. They might be in that top boat, surprisingly, for kids who just jump into your program mid-season or whenever they jump in, because they're so used to being asked to challenge themselves, and then here they go and they challenge themselves. Sometimes you have a basketball team, and that basketball team is probably most of your people of color. If you were to recruit that basketball team, they could do this sport and that sport. My only thing I would say is to be very clear with those athletes. If you're a scholastic team, depending on how your season works, be very clear of how they might have to. Rowing is a year-long program, a year-long sport for depending on the team you're in. They might have to choose between that sport that they were on and rowing. And you need to have that conversation with them a little bit earlier on, so they are at least prepared to drop one. But also, you might, depending on how your season is, you might be able to say, okay, well, you're here at this point in the year, but when this season is done for your basketball team, I need you here 100% for rowing. And a lot of kids, I've worked with kids who do that. Winter season, I don't see them. They're doing ice hockey somewhere. They're skiing. And then the first day of spring hits, they're on it. They're the ones on the run. They're the ones doing the jump ropes, whatever they have to do to get back into that shape, or to get into rowing shape. They're on it. So I definitely agree that you can do it. You just have to have a clear conversation with your athletes. this is what I expect from you. This is what I'm asking you to do. If you can't do it, then this is not the team for you. Yeah.
I keep forgetting to take mute off. Sorry. I go to keep someone going to say stuff. There is something here that that I would like to jump on real quick. Can you speak to building more diversity among coaches? So that'll be for you guys to ask. At a minimum, I think US Rowing should offer free level 1 and 2 coaching certification for BIPOC coaches, and I would love to hear other suggestions as well. As they say, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So I will say this, and then you guys let's have what you guys think about the first question, which is, can you speak to building more diversity? We are about to announce this week, we were going to anyways, that we are moving level 2 and level 3 to virtual classes. And so, you know, obviously with COVID and all that, we're not going to have people flying all over to take class. But we are also announcing that we are making not just level 1, 2, or 2, but also level 3 free to BIPOC coaches across the country. So to give more access to the certification at any of the levels. So that'll be coming out by the end of the week, and hopefully we can help move that along and get more diversity. So what do you got? What are your thoughts on building more diversity amongst coaching in the U.S.?
I think that, I mean, going with like that feeling you get when you have a teacher that like looks like you, and you know you just don't want to let them down. It makes you want to work all like that much harder. And I think the same goes for coaching. Having more visibility will also, I mean, we've had some interviews with some coaches of color, and they've shared stories, whether anonymously or not, they've shared stories about what it's like to coach a team that's all white, or a coach or a team that doesn't look like them. And you see the difference, you see the lack of support, you see how you're treated versus how they treat a white coach. And I think diversifying the coaches will help. Wouldn't say like solve, but it will be one of the steps to solve one of the problems with like attitude towards leadership. Leadership isn't just one color. Leadership is all shades of the rainbow. I mean, it's funny because we also have stories of people who say like they walk on the dock and they have their like stopwatch, they have their vest, they have their hat. It even says coach. They walk in the dock and people still are like, wait, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. They're dressed like a coach. They're acting like a coach. Why aren't they being treated like a coach? And so therefore, I think I don't want to say solves, but that's the word that comes to mind. It solves that problem of, okay, leadership is not just white. I think we have maybe 1 or 2 Black U.S. rowing referees. I can't remember specifically, but not just coaches, but referees as well. Leadership, the attitude towards leadership. And then also, I think, I don't know if this answers the question, but Manny Valentin just reached out to me, I think yesterday or the day before, about having a mentorship network for coaches of color to mentor each other. And I told him, I mean, I think the last time he and I crossed paths was maybe 5 years ago. And I mean, I haven't interacted with, I can't remember the last time I saw an Asian coach or a Philippine coach that I saw and just like, wow, like what a mentor, you know, like I really want them to be my mentor. But I remember seeing Manny command a whole event and seeing like, all right, this like Puerto Rican guy's got it. He's the guy in charge. And that was inspiring to me because as someone who's around students or people who don't look like me, whether they're all white or whether they're all Dominican or whether they're all Black, as someone who doesn't reflect the populations that they're coaching, it's hard to take that stance and say, and not just stand out for the reasons other than your skin color. You know, you want to stand out because you're the one in charge, you're the one who knows everything, you're the one who's going to make sure that everything operates smoothly, rather than you just being, you know, put into a box like, okay, like you're the Asian one. So I think that answered that question. I'm not sure.
I just wanted to add, I'm going to add on.
Okay.
So one thing I would say was, you don't also need, I think we definitely need to diversify, but if you're a white coach and you have a team of kids of different race, different color, you have to remember that it is your obligation, it's your duty to make them love the sport enough that they want to come back. Because most of us who are coaches, we were on the team and we're like, yeah, I'm not going to make it in the collegiate world, or I'm not going to make it in the Olympics as a rower. But I love this sport enough that I'm going to come back and I'm going to coach. I'm going to volunteer my time. You know, whatever. If it's an hour a week, then you've done your part as a coaching. You have to remember that it's your obligation as a white person to make a person of color who is underneath you and you're learning to love the sport to come back. A lot of people, like, you know, like, I think that's something we forget. Like, yeah, I can recruit, but right now, if we look around, there are not that many people of rowing who are of color who are just like, I would come back any day and do this as a job. That's something we need to teach us. Coaching is fun. Coaching is, there's this enjoyment. Yeah, you don't have to be the Olympian. You don't have to row in college to be part of this sport again. I personally did not row in college, and here I am 4 years after rowing, and I'm still coaching. I'm coaching, you know, kids of color, kids who don't look like me, white kids of privilege. I'm coaching everyone here, adults. You have to, there's that, it doesn't have to be a black coach in the boathouse to make a black kid want to row, or want to coach or want to do something. When I started rowing, if you listen to the podcast, and previously when I started rowing, and still now, all my coaches were white. They were white men, they were white women, they were white people who were not from New York. They're from upstate New York, from Texas. They were from everywhere but New York City, you know, Brooklyn. And so here I am. I love all those people who recruited me because they saw the rower in me. They saw the passion in me. So you can, as a white person, recruit your athletes who are now graduating out of your program to then coach for you. I think that is where we need to start, is recruiting from our like what we have in front of our organization now, not looking outside of it. Everything is happening in your org. You need to start looking in your org before you start looking out. Yeah, I don't know if I answered the question either, but that's my gist.
Well, I mean, I don't know, for a lot of these questions, I don't know if there is an exact answer anyways, but every time, you know, you guys express your experiences and your thoughts, I think it helps. You know, it might not cover the exact question, but it covers a lot of ground, right? And so, but can I ask a question? And I'm really, you had said earlier, Denise, like, you got to stop worrying about being wrong and just do it, you know, like, so is there a time when, so we're so far behind on this, right? That we've got to start making actions happen. Is it wrong to, I don't know what the right word is. So in these moments where we want to be proactive and move things forward, is it an awkward thing to do to create opportunities that weren't there before? Or is it, you know, somebody used the word token with me recently. Is it wrong to try to take steps forward by creating opportunities that just weren't there, just for the sake of creating and hoping to give more opportunities?
I would say there's a step missing there. I would say there's that blind spot that needs to be checked, because you can create opportunities, but is it the one that people are looking for? For example, if I'm like, oh no, like the store is locked, I need to get in, and you're like, oh, like, let me just open the window. I'm like, that's not what I meant. You know, like, you need to make sure that whatever opportunities you're creating are the one that fit the problem, or the one that fit the blind spot, you know, at hand. And I think within the context of what's happening within our sport right now, it's scary to act, it's scary to address, or it's scary to make the next step. But I think when it's so much like a human rights issue, and so much just it's everywhere, you know, I can't stop seeing videos in the media or the social media about like what is just happening in our country. I mean, you think this is happening in a war zone, but it's happening in Philly, it's happening in Seattle, it's happening in New York. And I think that in terms of like acting and trying to do what's next, I think first, before creating those opportunities, before acting, I mean, we really emphasize listening, then acknowledging, because you want to make sure you're not just dismissing folks who are bringing up the problem. You want to make sure that you're taking in that feedback and making it a conversation. So that way it's not just, you know, just a solution just to be performative, or a solution to just be self-congratulatory, but a solution that's going to work, not just for 5 minutes or until all this blows over, but a solution that'll work for the long term. Does that make sense?
It does. You know, I think one of the things that some of us are doing behind the scenes is trying to comb through all the places that, you know, like blind spots. You know, you're saying look at the blind spots. Trying to comb through all the places and just saying, where can we be better? Where are the places that we're missing opportunities? Where can we be better? and they're not necessarily all tied together, right? I mean, so individually, these might be little moments where you can create and do things that are helping move forward.
Right.
It just might not be all, in
Yeah.
concert sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely no one size fits all. Definitely no one size fits all. And I think, I mean, I can't see the chat right now, which I'm like, oh, how do I do that? I can't see the chat right now, but I can only imagine that whatever is being stated there is just the amount, it's just all data of what's needed right now. Because people would only tune in to this webinar if they cared so much about what solutions we're presenting, or what solutions, you know, US Rowing is presenting as a collective. And I think for folks who are in the chat right now, I mean, all of this is data, and I can only imagine what trends there are with regard to, like, okay, what can we fix right now? What's the biggest trend that we can actually feasibly fix, given, you know, our timeline and our budget, et cetera. But given that, I mean, the data's right there. And I didn't read all the comments or all the social media stuff on US Rowing page, but whatever the comments there are, like, that's also data as well. I mean, as much as it was hard, again, like I couldn't finish reading it all, but as much of it was hard to hear, as much as it's hard to read, it is coming from a place of pain. It is coming from a place of being omitted. It is coming from a place of being erased. It is coming from a place of not being represented in the sport. And so, I mean, once you take the heat off of it, once you take the heat out of a hot sauce, I mean, it tastes pretty good, right? And it enhances the meal. So let's take out the heat from, you see what I did there? Let's take out the heat. I'm not saying for folks to, like, not be angry. I'm not saying that at all. But look at it from, like, where are they coming from? What is not being protected? You know, what leadership are they not seeing? What fear is it? You know, what is being protected, and what are they afraid of? And I think when you look at it through that lens of, like, what's missing rather than the heat part of it, then you'll be able to see the flavor. Then you'll be able to see the substance, and then it'll be enhanced over the long term.
Patricia, what do you think? Is there?
I agree. I'm sorry, repeat that.
Well, I was just saying, I thought you were about to add something, and so I was asking what you thought.
No, I agree with what Denise is saying. This is something that we are seeing right now on, like, the microscope, but this is something that's always been happening. This is, you know, this is just the time where we're just like, oh my God, everyone put their glasses on. We're now realizing that we probably need to go back and check our blind spots again, you know, and just reevaluate everything. And that is the conversation that we need to keep having and do it again. And, like, yeah, you think you're done, just go back to it and just keep looking through what are our blind spots. Because when you fix one problem, there's something else that's going to pop up. And that's what we need to keep doing. We need to make this not okay, well, we're just trying to do this now in the moment because everyone, you know, peer pressure. Let's make this part of our day-to-day lives of asking, are we doing what's best for our program and our team and our, you know, our rowing community? Because you know, whatever it means, if it means us finding youth and asking these questions, because they are our future, they are the generation of rowing, you know, if it means asking more of them why they don't feel happy in the sport, what they are feeling, because I think one of the biggest things that happens is we forget to ask them those questions, even though, you know, we kind of look at them and go, well, they're kids, they don't really know, you know, they don't know how to express it. And I think, yes, it may take longer for them to get the idea across, but they know what they want. They know their future. I know that me and Denise, we've worked with a wonderful young woman, Kira, and she knows what she wants. She knows what she wants so much that at 14 years old, she created her own rowing team. You know, like, that's 14. If I'm at 14, I've just joined rowing and I know what I want enough that I can go and create a team that is diverse in my public school, because I know that in my private school program, I'm the only person of color, so I need to go somewhere out. I need to create a space that fits everyone. And she knows that at 14, then we need to stop doing the whole, they don't know what the future looks like. They don't understand rowing. They, you know, yeah, they may not understand the little mechanics of things. And then we have coaching staff who've been in rowing for 30 years and they still don't understand how to fix a boat half the time. So that's not a conversation that we need, that, you know, that's not an excuse. We need to keep asking those questions to them, because at the end of the day, when we end up at the trials, we end up at the Henley, most of the boats that we are watching race course are for the junior athletes. They're for the under 23. They're for, like, you know, like, the Masters team is it exists, and yes, they are there, but they are not who we like always go to watch a regatta for. Most of our programs around rowing are for the youth, and so we need to remember to refer to them for the future answer, because they have to live in this world that we are creating. And if they're not happy in it, you know, even if we say everything's all like dandy, that's not the truth. So we need to keep asking our youth of color. In rowing, we need to keep asking our white athletes, because you have white athletes out there who are young and they're still just like, yeah, I don't know how to tell my coach that I don't feel comfortable because this team is all white and my friends outside of rowing are mixed and everything else. But my friends at rowing, I feel like I'm stuck because I can't introduce my black friends to my white friends because my white friends in rowing won't understand my black friends. That's a real conflict that I have kids who tell me this all the time. You know, you need to make them comfortable that they can ask those questions in rowing and then feel comfortable bringing their friends of color to their boat house and get those friends of color on your team. That is how you get a recruiting team. That's how you build a diverse team, is to fix the issues early on for our youth, and then we can fix it with our adult program. It trickles upwards. That problem, it trickles up. Yeah, we need to talk to our leadership, but the questions and the conflict happens at the bottom. Yeah, that was my little deal.
You know, and there's a question, Patricia, that we can go back to about that. Real quick, we keep using the word blind spot, and it's an amazing word when you think about it in this context. Delaney put on here that there's a book called Blind Spot: Hidden Biases of Good People. And so for those of you who are listening, Blind Spot: Hidden Biases of Good People. If you are looking for a good read, I just wanted to get that. Some people are in the chat, and some people are in the Q&A. So, but there were some questions, tips for recruiting, and Patricia, you were just talking about, how do you keep somebody who's a person of color, keep them in the boathouse and make them feel comfortable and welcome to move forward. And so there are some questions here. If you have an all-white rowing program and you'll be having your first Black athlete joining, what can you do to make them feel comfortable, supported, heard, seen, able to be themselves in your program?
Stop looking at their color. I know this sounds crazy, stop looking at their color. Yes, they are Black, but they're joining because they love the sport. You recruited them because they fit the mold of your team. Look at that before you look at their color, because yes, they're gonna. As a Black person, I've said this before. You've probably heard other Black people say this. When I walk into a room, I count the Black people. Yes, I do. 100%. I will not deny it. If you ever see me walk into a room with you guys and you're white, know that I'm looking for fellow Black allies. Why? Because I need to know that if you say something to me as a white person and it's not, and it comes off wrong to me, you rub me the wrong way, I need to know there was other Black people around the way. So then I can be like, okay, did you understand it? Did that make sense to you? Or is it just me in my head? Am I building something up? So you need to stop. But when I walk into a room knowing that people just are going to welcome me and there's no hesitation, the person is already aware. That Black student joining you is going to be aware already that they're Black. They need to just know that they're there for a specific reason of being an athlete. So it doesn't mean that you see that kid and you go, yo, what's up? I hate when I've seen white people look at me and they go into this high five, I'm like, why I've just met you? Why are we going to these complex handshakes? A nice handshake is fine. A simple one. Hello, what's your name? That the yo, what's up? Whatever slang your athletes might be using, I would have a conversation earlier on with them and just be like, look, I have a new student joining. They are from this place, wherever they're from, and this is what they're going to be doing on the team. Make it very clear that this is a human being, and they're joining a rowing team. They're not the Black human, boy, girl, whatever gender they decide, but they are the Black. They're the human being joining our team. I think that's the best way to do it. It's not pointing out their color because they already know it. And then if in the future, when you have that student on your team, if they come to you and they're like, look, I feel uncomfortable because X, Y, and Z has happened, you need to then confront it. I remember I have a team, and one of my coworkers, Ian Terrell, we have a team. He's a white coach. I'm a Black coach. We run a team. We have an Asian child. We have Black kids. We have white kids. I remember our Asian student came to us and was like, I felt inappropriate because walking home, one of the student athletes did something I felt uncomfortable with. In that moment, we called the student in. We called that other student that was doing the inappropriate behavior, and we dealt with it because she's a human being and she deserves to be she deserves to get respect, and her feelings need to be acknowledged. We talked to that student. We talked to her. She was like, we're like, do you feel comfortable being in a space with this particular human being from now on? Because she is now in a situation where she felt harassed. And we need to deal with that appropriately. Once that happened, you know, that student was like, no, I felt better because I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't in my head, that I was not like, I didn't just create this issue in my head. Once you felt acknowledged, it was fine. Then we had a team conversation. You know, he as a white coach was like, this is inappropriate. This should never happen. No woman, no man, no guy, as if you shouldn't make anyone feel inappropriate. As a Black coach, I was like, okay, you're a white man and you're able to say this. And he held his ground to our students who are Black and white and Asian. He could have easily been like, well, Patricia, I feel uncomfortable because the student who caused the harassment was a Black student. And so he could have put me in front and been like, you deal with it. He stood up and he was like, I am going to deal with it because this is my team and we need to talk about it because I'm a guy and he's a boy and he shouldn't do this ever to anyone. You have to be able to have those conversations early on and not feel like you need to put someone else to defend it. If you're a woman and if it's a male Black athlete joining, you should be able to feel comfortable talking to this male Black athlete. If you're a white woman, if you're a white man, you'll talk to your Black female athlete about whatever they're feeling and acknowledge that their emotions are real and that you need to talk to your teammates. You know, you also probably heard another story on our podcast where you had a Black female athlete who a male athlete said the N-word to, and all the other athletes laughed about it. As we know that the N-word is not a word that we should be playing around with. It's a derogative term, you know, and it's even more derogative term when a person is saying it to a Black person. It holds a stronger power, it's a weapon being used against that Black child. And when you as a coach, you look at it and go, well, you just do burpees and call that a day, and you don't address the issue at hand, the fact that this child is saying a racist comment to another human being, and you just tell them to do burpees and then you move on about your day, that is where the issue lies. You need to confront that child in front of your team and be like, this is why this is wrong and this is why you're doing this punishment, because you've offended a person not only just by like saying a mean word, but you use a derogative term, which holds a lot of negative impact to this person. You don't know where this human being has heard this before, and now you're using it in a space where it's supposed to be safe. If you're a white coach and you're welcoming a Black student onto your team or a Black participant, you need to be ready to be put in situations that are going to make you as a white person feel uncomfortable. But it's the name of the game. It's an uncomfortable game because the same way if you're a white man and a white woman, you have a white female athlete, and she's like, this white man is making me feel uncomfortable, you need to step up into it. It's the same way you as a white man or white woman who's in a leadership position need to step up to a Black child or a child of color or a participant of color saying, I feel uncomfortable because X, Y, and Z has occurred. Yeah, that was a detailed way of going about that question, but I think that's the best way. You need to be uncomfortable dealing with uncomfortable situations.
So, dude, man, there's so much here, so much here. I'm looking at all the questions, and I'm trying to read all the questions in the Q&A, and I'm trying to read the chat while it's going on, and then and listen. And I wonder if, we should just make a standing call once a week. There's so much here, and it's all over the map, right? Masters and kids and this and that. Like, what if we organized it and just started having a weekly chat and we talk about, hey, all right, we're going to talk about masters in diversity this week. And we're going to, there's so many aspects of DE&I. Like, I feel like let's do this once a week and pick something that I feel like my mind is all over the place right now trying to figure out what to ask you next because there's so many questions coming in one after the other. We could have one talk about masters and DEI, and we could have another one talk. What do you guys think? Are you free every Wednesday?
what what
I'm
about
half,
sponsorships?
I'm half kidding.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk we can talk off camera. We can definitely talk maybe some sponsorships, or you had me at organize, so I'm happy about organizing data. Obviously, I like organizing things, so yeah, we can talk off camera. Maybe there's some sponsorship there, make it a regular thing, and coaching education. Who knows? Who knows? Put it in the chat.
We have, and we have so many, like, whether it be race or gender or orientation, or I mean, like, we have so much that we're so afraid to talk about. Let's talk about it. Like, let's get after it and start conversations and keep them going. But I have a lot of questions. Are you guys open for a couple more questions? You like to keep going with questions?
Yeah, I'm fine. The dog went for a walk, so
I know, I like the dog. He came on, checked everything else, and he was out.
she needed attention.
Do you guys have do you mind if I keep throwing some more questions out?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I like
Yeah.
this. Do this.
Let's just start from the top then. So I'll try to keep it organized, Denise, because now I know
No, that's okay.
I'm gonna be under the gun to be organized here, so I make sure I do this right.
It's
Do
all
you have
good.
recommendations for opening up recruiting pipelines, as in methods or places to start?
Well, I think it depends what your beginner program is. For example, if you're recruiting for, let's say you're a program that you have a high school, middle school team, then is there anything stopping you from starting an indoor rowing program for 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th graders? That way, like, rowing is in the school. It's something that's visible, and the teachers will make sure, did you go to rowing practice today? And that pipeline starts there. I know it's a lot of investment for high school. Rowing starts there, starts in the gym classes, and then it moves right on up. And so I guess in terms of pipeline, it does depend on where you're ending, and what your capacity is for starting. Because, for example, you could say in colleges, what pipeline you have there. I mean, do you have any outreach events? Do you have any student groups that you partner with throughout the year? Like, what's the most popular student group, or what's the most diverse student group event where having an erg would be necessary? I mean, you're not going to have one at, like, I don't know. The only event I went to was called Barrio Fiesta, and you wouldn't have an erg at that event, but you might have an erg at a fitness expo, and maybe that's the most populated event on campus, and so that can be your outreach event, and that could be your pipeline. Start with where people are at, and then build the bridge from there. I mean, same goes with the data. I mean, people are giving a lot of information, a lot of questions. That's data too. A lot of questions about what's needed, and therefore let's start there, and then build from there. Build a product, build a solution.
Patricia?
I agree. I think I have more history with working with youth. So the way you do it with the youth is recruiting is just, you need to slowly figure out your area, your community. You need to evaluate your community and then build from there. Let's say you're in a Hispanic community, then you need to probably hang out at the restaurants, go around your market around there and evaluate who is there. If it has such a large following of, if they have a lot of kids there in that community, then from there you need to start looking into the schools. What are the schools lacking in that community? And that's information I think a lot of times you can find if you just go onto a realtor website. They tend to have the school zones, and you can look into your school and see what programs they have and what they supply. And then if you're looking into high schools, at least in New York, every high schooler, when they're graduating, they get a thick book of what the school has, and this is how they kind of look at what high schools they want to go to. Look at what the school is giving, and then from there you have to figure out how you are going to offer your service. How do you sell your product, which is rowing, to that school? And then that might be heavy lifting, because carrying ergs up flight of stairs in schools that have no elevator is part of the job. And Denise can tell you, we've definitely struggled with about 10, 12 ergs up staircases just to give rowing to a group of kids. So you need to figure out what your schools in your community are lacking and figure that out. And if you're looking more for the adult area of the page, I would say look at your colleges. Every location has the closest college. Your community college, I would say, more than the prestigious school in your area. Go to your community colleges. and look at what sports are giving. Most community colleges don't either have a space for the gym, or if they do have a gym, it's a basketball gym. And they only do basketball there, and they, you know, everyone else is kind of just doing their thing. Look at what programs that they might be missing, and then find your athletes. There are athletes who were athletes in high school, gone to college, and now they're just like, I don't have any idea of what I can do next, and they want to be active. Adults want to be active. Find those athletes and recruit them. Look, you know, hey, find the people who don't know how to swim and then offer swimming in your community. Find your local pool, have a conversation with them, and then make that your space to go. Find swimmers at your local pool, because if they know how to swim there, they're not going to be afraid to jump into a boat and learn how to row. You just have to, I think we need to, a lot of times, we need to get out of our comfort zone of our box. Like, I'm going to look for rowers. And just look outside those circles. Look outside that box of just rowers. Find new ways of looking for people. Use your realtor page and look at the schools in your neighborhood, or what your economic. I think that it's weird that I know this because I don't even own a house. If you go on your realtor pages in your community, it tells you like what people kind of make. They give you like the percentages of what people are ranging in. Wealth-wise, like, hey, this person in this neighborhood will make about $200,000 a year. So if you're looking for low income, if your program is a nonprofit and you're looking for more low income, I would not go to that. I would go for the neighborhood that is, you know, has the highest government assistant areas, and then figure out how to go about that, if that is something you guys are looking for. But it's getting out of your normal comfort zone and working with.
Yes, I'm consistent. I keep doing it.
Right.
One of the things when we were starting our middle school program, we started going to the sports that had the most cuts. Like, you know, as you go higher in high school, right, there's less chances of making the team, and they cut more people. So all those people are looking for something to do if they're getting cut. So that's where we went. And soccer was one of those places where, I mean, there was only going to be a certain amount of kids that made the team. All the other ones got cut. And so, you know, we were all ready to go, like, hey, so you're not doing anything in the spring? We got something for you to do. You know, like, what do you think? And so that was a start. Let's see here. Not everyone has Instagram or social media. We need to send those documents out in another way. That's a good point.
Yeah, we're definitely working on a website. I mean, like we said, we're volunteer. We're doing this because we want to, and we didn't know that a website could be so much work. So thank you for your patience. We are working on it.
Let's see here. Bonnie Mueller has, let's see here. We've had feedback from some of our Black rowers in our community that posting black squares is not helpful, as especially in this moment, it feels, at least to them, that the nation doing so is more upsetting. So it would be great to have a bit of counsel, guidance on how to balance the different feelings of different individuals, wishing to be respectful to all, and your insights on how to navigate this with empathy and love.
I mean, I think everyone's entitled to feel how they feel. And I think the validation, especially, I mean, the black squares, I think I got it wrong. I think it wasn't well organized, or there was something. They were supposed to be like, you're supposed to repost this and tag that. And it was already 4 p.m. that day, and I don't even know. But with that being said, I think there was a little bit of organization behind it that didn't get the message across for all folks to, you know, use the action with the right intention. But with that being said, I mean, hands down, every day of the week, everyone's feelings are valid, you know, at all times. I mean, going back to, I can't remember what story, but we were talking about like the homogeneity of like all black people's experiences are not all the same. All Asian American experiences are not all the same. All Latinx people like experiences are not all the same. And therefore we can't just assume that everyone's going to feel the same exact thing, and everyone's allowed to feel exactly how they feel in whatever time that they feel, because we're all healing, or we're all processing in a very different way. We're all experiencing things in different ways, and we all have a lot of experiences that kind of shape that narrative for how we approach things that we encounter, you know, going forward. So I mean, hands down, folks' feelings are valid. And it's important to validate that and say, you know, like we said before, and with acknowledging, you know, I hear you, and I'm here for you when you need to process this. I'm here for you when you're ready, but I'm also here for you when you're not ready, and that's fine too. And I think just validating at the end of the day. And like I say that with like I don't have any I don't have a social work background. I have a lot of interest in mental health. I mean, on one of the episodes that we're dropping tomorrow, I do talk openly about mental health and about going, like, I attend therapy, and I think it's been the most positive impact on my life. And I think to have one's feelings validated, to have one's experiences validated, and I guess like just given a space to exist and know that no, like I'm acting this way because of all these experiences, and that's okay because I'm processing a lot, and that's fine. So as long, like, validate at the end of the day, every single day of the week, validate.
Do you have any recommendations on how university programs with novice teams can encourage more diversity in the recruitment process at the university level, both in terms of initially recruiting athletes, but also in terms of retaining them?
And Patricia, if you don't mind, I'll take this. I think this reminds me of a conversation I was having with someone today. I think it depends. I mean, a lot of it, in short, yes, there is something that can be done. And I think when you look at, I mean, rowing is one of the rare sports where having a walk-on at the age of 18, you can still build them up to be elite level. I mean, it's unheard of. I mean, gymnastics, your career's done at like 13 or 14, but rowing, you can start at 18. You can start at any age and still progress to be the best athlete, the best rower, the best version of yourself within that sport. And so given that, I think I don't have a recruiter background. I went to a club school, so take that into account. But given the conversations that I've had with folks from our podcast, from folks who've reached out, from folks who've wanted to connect with each other, from the conversations there, I think there is an opportunity, if you do have the budget, to recruit folks who come from a very athletic background, because you got the values right there. You got sportsmanship, you got drive, you got hard work, you got someone who's going to follow directions, and just translate that into rowing. You got yourself an athlete right there. You got yourself someone who doesn't have the bad habits. Not that every rower who has like middle school or high school experience has the bad habits, but sometimes they happen. You know, the imbalances are there. The body grows, but at the very least, you know that when you recruit someone at the age of 18, you do know that they're going to probably be that same height all the way through, versus when someone's growing in middle school or high school, that body changes, and therefore that stroke changes, and therefore the technique changes. I don't know, just guessing. But I'm thinking that there is opportunity to recruit from different sports, especially if there are athletes there who, I mean, like you said, Chris, like didn't make the cut for, you know, D1 lacrosse or D1 swimming or D1 track, and they're looking to be recruited for something else. Yeah, why not? For schools who don't have the budget, I don't have an answer yet, but I do have a lot of people, a lot of contact with a lot of people who are asking those questions and do have more background, who do have more context there. And I think that's the amazing thing about what we do. I mean, we're here to connect people. We're not the ones who have all the answers. We happen to be, I mean, right now we're just in the bottleneck, but as we grow our community and as we create more Facebook pages, more like as we build that website, so that way it's more accessible. As we build these communities, then we have more people with more experience trying to figure out what the right solution is. Because I think, I mean, to say that we know the answer to every question is a joke. To say that we have experience, I mean, that's the truth. But to say that we have all the answers is a joke. And to speak very honestly, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with recruiting when you don't have a budget. But if you recruit and you do have a budget, I mean, why not? Why not recruit the folks who are switching sports and build them up from scratch at the age of 18?
And then, I mean, you know, for a lot of the sports, you have people that'll, am I muted? No. You know, get injured or can't continue on with the sport that they were in. But rowing's always welcoming, right? It really doesn't matter how old you are or where you are in life. You can always row. Yeah. So that's, that is awesome. Let's see here. More questions. Patricia, you used the word gatekeeper earlier, and somebody asked if you could explain the word gatekeeper?
Um, did they state where I said it in what
No,
context?
it's at 7:58. Like, that's the problem when with all the hopping around. If you don't get it when the question came in, you sort of miss the context.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I've used the word in the past. Maybe when I say gatekeeper, at least for rowing, I think I usually talk about Black people in rowing. We kind of are, well, coaches are, we're kind of like, it's a gatekeeping. It's, the gatekeeping is in the sense where it's like, we kind of, we're put in charge of like protecting position, protecting our position in rowing. With we constantly are trying to be like, okay, well, we have to kind of stick together. We kind of have to stick together, and we have to protect this position we're in, and not allow white people to push us out of it. And I think coaches staff, a lot of times we need to become the gatekeepers. We need to protect our team, and we need to make sure we allow people to come in and come out. And we need to be not going to allow negative behavior. I'm not going to allow you to push this person out because they don't fit the rowers mold, you know, and whoever created that, they're not white, they're not rich enough, they don't come from the same background as you, that they don't belong in this space. So I think we need to learn to be gatekeepers of closing the gate to people like that in rowing, and opening the gate to people of color who are, or white people in general, who are like, this is a sport for everyone, and we all need to stick together and row a good boat. Like, when I get into a boat, I'm not looking at, okay, well, is 3 feet behind me, 2 feet in front, like, you know, is 4 feet in front of me Black or white? I'm like, I'm in the boat, and I'm just like, does she have I have her back, does this person have my back behind me? Are we going to row this boat, as one strong team, or am I going to have a physical fight within our team? Everyone knows or has felt when you sit in a boat and there is tension between one athlete and another athlete in the boat, or between the coxswain and the coach. If there is a weird vibe going on, that practice is filled with tension. And when that happens, that boat we're spinning in circles. Like, nothing. We can call every pick drill, we can do every technical exercise on the water. That practice will not be our top practice, because there's some conflict there, and we need to then work on, when you hit the water, that's when you can solve it. But as rowers, we need to treat the way we talk to each other, the way we deal with each other, white, black, yellow, whatever color, like that, as we are in a boat. You don't want to go into a boat with conflict. Why should we row? Why should we be on a team like that? And so we need to be cautious of who and what we are allowing on our team. And so we need to be gatekeepers that way. We need to be gatekeepers and protect our team, our community, by not allowing negative behavior to sit and be in here. If we have someone on your team, if you have a head coach, and this comes from, if there's a head coach, a lot of times as assistants, as anyone who's under them, we're afraid to have that conflict. We're afraid of that tug of war. You know, you can't be, because if that head coach is kind of like, oh, well, I don't see why we need to do this extra recruiting session, or this extra, I don't see why we need to do this extra, you know, diversity, inclusion conversation, then that's a problem, because they should not be leading the team, because they're not leading us to victory. They're just holding us in the same place. We're not moving. We're stuck at the start line, and we're not racing down the race course. Everyone else is going, because everyone else is being led by leaders, and we're being held in the same spot. You need someone. We as a team then need to sit down and be like, maybe that's not the person who should be stroking this boat. So as a team, I think we need to be gatekeepers in not allowing people to hold us back in our diversity. And like Denise said earlier, diversity is not black, white, and it's not always in color. It's more in just in human mixtures. Like, you have gay people, we have, you know, like transgenders. We need to have a team that fits everyone, not a team that's like holding anyone back because you don't fit the mold that we're trying, that rowers, someone a long time ago has said this was a rowing mold. I hope that like answer that question if that person wants to jump back in and say specifically what I meant by that. But that's usually how I use the term gatekeeper when I do talk about it in rowing.
Patricia, two things about that. Number one, we can do this like we were talking about before, once a week, and really get into a lot of the stuff. We still have 150 people, and we're 2 hours in, so we're never going to run out of things to talk about for sure, right? Number two, I believe that you gave in your presentation, you gave your contact emails. Is it okay if people contact you and ask you about these things?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. My email.
How can U.S. Rowing play a part in helping me to learn the skills and make the connections to become a coach for diverse rowers? Is the question that Colin has. And as Colin had mentioned earlier, there could be a bigger role to play for masters around the country as well. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, Colin asked, how can U.S. Rowing play a role in giving him more skills to coach people of diverse backgrounds?
Yeah. Denise, do you want to jump
Sure.
on
Yeah.
it, or?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we have coaching level certification. Why not have, DEI competency education? That's something to think about. And, if you want to hire us, we're happy to create that curriculum. In addition to that, I mean, we also have other certifications as well. I mean, indoor rowing, safe sport, all these certifications. And I think as it relates to safety within our sport, I mean, using the analogy of, listen, acknowledge, and course correct, and, where is the boat that is U.S. rowing right now? Like who's in danger right now? I mean, given that analogy, I think we really need to, I mean, I'm not a part of U.S. rowing, obviously. Other than like as a member, but I think as U.S. rowing, I think what needs to happen is weighing where diversity stands with relation to like within the definition of safety. Safety for whom? Safety from whom? Where is diversity within that? And I think, again, like looking at the data, looking at the questions, looking at what folks are saying, what folks' needs are, what folks' fears are. I think the data is there. There must be patterns, there must be trends. And given that information, I mean, I think US rowing really needs to weigh where diversity stands with regard to, is it a certification worthy course, or is it just like that one thing a year, or is it something that people take every 2 years, just like safe sport? And I think I mean, the ball is in US rowing's court there, but I think for the most part, that's a consideration for sure. And I mean, this podcast it was here 6 months ago, and it'll be here 6 months from now, and I mean, we're happy to be here as a resource. Every episode, every question, every change we've made to the podcast so far has been because we've listened to our listeners and we've taken their feedback seriously. So I think we attribute a lot of our growth to them, and want to make sure that pattern also applies to US rowing as well. I mean, what are the listeners saying, so to speak, and how can we make sure that we adjust accordingly to better serve?
I'll just jump in real quick too, and because Devin Fay has a question later on about what's U.S. rowing been doing for the last 10 years. We've had a diversity and inclusion for how long, and nothing has been done. So let me just answer that, and I may be speaking out of turn as just an employee. The answer, Devin, is we haven't followed through. We have, I read the DE&I strategic planning it took years to create. And when it was created, it was put on a shelf, and it wasn't prioritized. We didn't follow through. And so the answer is pretty clear that we had great ideas. We had phenomenal people on that committee, and they came up with great initiatives. We just didn't enact them. So, I mean, ideas are great unless you don't use them. So, I mean, I think, Colin, part of the answer to your question is U.S. rowing can do more and become more. And get better. Devin, the answer to your question is we have to follow through on the things that we talk about. And, we spend all those years creating a set of initiatives that were really well-rounded and grounded, and then not do them. it's the doing that matters. And so we're judged by our actions. Obviously, look at, read the chat right now. We are go on Instagram or any of these other places. We're being judged by what we didn't do. And so we've got to step to the plate. So that's, you guys are welcome to jump on that if you want. Okay. I see you, Denise. I see that smile. Okay, I got.
Yeah, no.
I think
no.
Patricia, everything.
I'll text her to see if she's okay.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cause a disturbance in the force like that. My goodness. Let's see here. Another question. Denise, what do you think about boathouses across the country setting diversity goals? Like, I mean, should that be a norm? Shouldn't it be?
Yes, I absolutely think it should be a norm. I mean, 2020 has been such a year so far, and we still have the elections, right? And I think that whatever happens, I mean, whatever your political stance is, I mean, freedom of speech, have whatever political stance you want. But given how drastically, oh, hi, Patricia.
Hi, sorry.
Given how it's, how it almost feels like all of the progress with regard to human rights, with regard to, now as someone who's queer, I'm like, wait, I thought I was allowed, like if I wanted to get married and adopt a kid, I thought that was a done deal, and now I hear it's being reversed, or I hear like it's in the works of being reversed. And I think that especially given the political climate of our country, not just the last 3 or 4 years, I mean, it's only in the spotlight now because of who's president, but this has been happening on or off camera. A lot of the exclusivity, a lot of the anti-whoever, a lot of that, this is what America's supposed to look like sentiment has been happening on or off camera even before this president was here. And I think, especially given the political climate, there's no guarantee what's going to happen in November. There's no guarantee, even, no matter what the result of the election, that our country's going to change like this. There's no guarantee for that. So I think making the change, making diversity a common goal for our sport, I think if you're going to be all in, if you're going to choose diversity, if you're going to choose to go in that direction, you can't just get in a boat and say, I'm only going to take 2 hard strokes today. You got to go all in. You got to be in it. And I think, yes, absolutely. Every boathouse, why wouldn't you say that? Why wouldn't you want the folks who are 1 mile away, the small business that's right up the block, to be the partner for all of your catering events, or the apartment building that's just half a mile away, to be the primary residents or the primary participants for your program. We should's a loaded word, but there's no reason why we should. Darn, I'm trying to avoid should. There's no reason why we should aim to have our communities represented in our boathouse. Because we can say over and over and over, I mean, like you said, Chris, we can say all these goals, but it won't mean a damn thing unless we do something about it. So you can say, oh, I want my boathouse to look like my country. Okay, well, let's start with our communities first. What do you got a mile around you? What do you got 2 miles around you? Who are you engaging? Who's involved? Who's a part of the planning? Who's a part of the decision making? So I'd say green light, let's go. There's nothing stopping us.
I'll address a major thing that's going on in the chat right now. So Denise, we planned this on Monday and Tuesday. We put this together for tonight, and we knew it was a 1 hour webinar, and the board meetings that's been scheduled for a long time was supposed to be tonight. So the board at 8 o'clock left to do their board meeting, and there's some hammering going on in the chat, and yeah, it's uncomfortable, and I get it. I hear you all. That those of you who are insulted that the board left. The board, this was supposed to be a 1 hour webinar. It doesn't mean that they don't care. You're talking about 15 volunteers that are working hard as well on so many things, and just keeping U.S. rowing afloat. I mean, much less all the other topics that are just staying a viable organization. So I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just saying, spend an awful lot of time in chat tearing it apart, and we're having a discussion, here, like, I mean, they stayed for the hour that it was supposed to be, and they had a board meeting, and I apologize that they had to leave for that. So I apologize. I just don't, sometimes the expectations, it's frustrating when we're focused on that when we should be focused on so many other bigger things as well. Some more questions. I need to ask you guys I want to be respectful of your time. It is 9:11 right now. Do you want more questions? Do you want to plan another meeting for next week? And by the way, all y'all 134 people, I hear you. We're going to try to find a way to keep Denise and Patricia going. We're going to try to find a way to keep this energy, this synergy happening. So yes, I'm reading those things in chat, and yes, we are going to do what we can to keep these two wonderful people as a resource. So thank you for that. Denise and Patricia, it is about 9:15. What would you do? You want to take a few more? Do you want to just say, look, we got to get to organizing now, and we'll do one a week? You tell me what you want to do.
I think Patricia and I could talk for hours. I mean, literally, we could talk for hours.
Yeah, we can.
I mean, look at our podcast. We could talk for hours. I think Patricia and I can talk for hours. But I think for now, and I think for I guess for how to move forward and how to make sure that we want to acknowledge the leadership of U.S. Rowing. I think we're independent. And I think whatever's going on, like we have no, it's not our place to tell. It's not our place to tell you what to do or how to react or how you feel is validated. Obviously, your feelings are always valid. And I think with regard to the board leaving, I mean, Patricia and I are going to do this, whether in a U.S. rowing setting or whether in our own setting, no matter what. And I think that given that, I can't speak for anyone else's behavior or decisions or et cetera, or actions, but I know speaking for us, I think we can talk for hours and hours about this and are happy to share as much just to make sure that our community and our sport just goes in the right direction. But I just want to make sure we're all giving time to ourselves and the people that, we're all home, we're all quarantined right now. And I'm happy to be here. I'll text my setup on the Instagram. I'm happy to be here. I know, Patricia, you just charged your phone. You just texted me. You charged your phone. We're all happy to be here. We're all happy to do this. But I think it would be good for a pause right now. And whatever format that we choose to return in, whether it's through another US Rowing webinar, whether it's through a podcast episode, whether it's through another, Patricia, we could figure out doing a live stream. I mean, whatever format it does take place, we'd love to come back. But maybe let's take a pause. And I guess Patricia, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, one thing I just want to say is thank you to, I know that a lot of times we just talk about the coaching staff, but we forget about the other staff members that are within the boathouse, within the site that, everyone, we can't forget our boatsmen who make sure our equipment works and everything like that. And we forget that they're an impact on our athletes as well. And so one person I would definitely say thank you to, since I've been working, is Bailey Hughes. Bailey Hughes is she's a white woman who she does an amazing job with all our athletes. And she definitely has participated in supporting all our athletes of color into this into learning how to row. She's taking time out of her when she could have just been working on boats and minding her own business. She's definitely done her part where she's sat with an athlete who is just not comfortable rowing, and she's found new ways to teach them the ways that me, or like I said, my coworker Ian couldn't do. And those are the coaching staffs, and those are staff members in general that we need to keep remembering, include them into the diversity conversation. excuse me, conversation, because at the end of the day, they are just impactful as the physical coach who's working with that team. And so definitely we look at our staff members as just rowers. You need to look at all the other ends, and you know, we're all in this together, you know, but it doesn't matter what flag you're flying under, what rowing program you're in, what level of financial security you're at. We're all rowers. We're all in the rowing world. We've all chose to be here, and so it is our duty to work together and figure out how to get to the next level, figure out that diversity, figure out the balance. Because if we keep doing this tug of war of, well, finger pointing in why didn't you do enough, and who did this and who did that, the job won't get done. It's like having a house full of children and telling them to do chores, and they're all pointing fingers like, well, that was this person's job to do. I did this. That's not going to get us anywhere. We need to stop pointing fingers and go, okay, well, what is your strength and what is your weakness, and let's work together to get to the next goal. And the next goal is to have 5 years down the line, people of color, women, men, in a boat rowing on a magazine, the front cover of a magazine, not as just first. Now, okay, well, first Black rower. No, this person broke this record. That is what we are looking for. That is our goal in the future. Our future is to have the Kiras not feel like they have to make a team because their team doesn't look like them. We just want a team that's there already. We want kids to just be joining. We want adults to just be joining. I think that's, at the end of the day, that's our takeaway. That's what we should take away from every time we have these conversations, is not finger pointing. It is, what do we do as a program, as a community, to get to our next step?
Well, couple of things. I want Kira to do a webinar, because I've been reading the stuff that she's been putting out there, and she's an exceptional young lady. So Kira, when you're ready, I'm ready. And so there's one idea for the future. Denise, well, first of all, you two are awesome in the way that you can speak to all people. The rainbow, right, Patricia? You can speak to the whole rainbow. And so
rainbow.
you won't, I know you won't say it without blushing, or I know you won't say it, but for everybody who's listening, there's a link in there that you can support these women, and from where I'm sitting, I'll do what I can as well, but y'all can go onto that link and do it, and they won't, I mean, I know you won't ask, but the rest of you can go on there and check that out. That's, Grace has put it in there, and Mason Cox put it in there, so you don't have to be shy either. Speaking of that, Denise and Patricia, offline, I have a whole idea how we can make this a constant thing looking forward. So,
We'll
you know,
talk.
people like you are amazing and important to us all. So, number one, I want to thank you for being here tonight and giving us your time. And number two, you are carrying the weight of a lot of people on your shoulders on a daily basis, and I know you're exhausted. And so I want to thank you for, I mean, you know, those of you who don't know, Denise and I have been trying to get back and forth for a couple weeks now, and she wrote me at 1:30 in the morning, and I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, she had to, 1:30 in the morning, for her to have to find some time to write me back an email. So, you know, I know you guys are carrying a load, and it must be exhausting to do this for the rest of us. So thank you for that. Denise, can we assume that the organizer in the group is you, and that we can do something maybe next week? You tell me when and where. Patricia, I'm going to nominate Denise. Patricia, would you second the nomination?
100%. Denise is the organizer.
Wouldn't it be funny if Patricia was the mastermind? I mean,
She might be. Well, she might be the mastermind by seconding the nomination to have you do the organizing.
She could just be a trickster right now, just trying to fool you. I'm telling you.
No, it's all Denise.
Don't let her fool you.
Well, I don't mess with coxswains, so I'm just telling you right now. So why don't we come up with something where we can pick a time, a regular talk, and we can, I mean, you know, it can change. We can talk whatever we want, but we can sort of have an idea going in of something that we're going to talk about. And, you know, we'll do this. I mean, whatever day works the best for you, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, we shall see. Yeah, for sure.
We shall see. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. It has opened up many minds, mine especially. It's running wild right now with all the things that are possible, and that's all thanks to you. Thank you all for joining us. There's so many of you still on, and we're 2.5 hours into it. This topic transcends winning and losing on the water, doesn't it? And it's funny, if you close your eyes, we all love rowing, probably for the same reasons, and it has nothing to do with race, gender, or orientation, or any of that business. We all love rowing, and so we're all here for the same reason, and we want to make it better. So thank you both. I hope you get a really good night's sleep. You've done amazing work tonight, and I will, when Denise, let's catch up, and Patricia, let's catch up and figure out what we can do moving forward and keep this conversation. This is just the first step. We have so much more to do, and we're not going to solve it all in any one sentence or one talk or for 1 year, but we can keep trying. Mm-hmm. So I just want to say thank you to you both, and guys, everybody who's listening, we'll get something out to you and tell you what's coming next.
Thanks so much for having us.